quick, supposed to not to disturb too much with other projects, and so on. We are back to the greedy set cover, just to nail it. Greedy set cover, we said, I'm picking the largest set that gives me a revenue of A1. I raise everything that's a first set, so picking the second set that gives me the maximum revenue, is C in the art gallery, it was that C is the maximum area that the first guard doesn't see, and so on and so forth. And I'll continue. And the SL that you see over here is the SL is just the sum of the revenues up to the L step. And what we have seen in the last two meetings was what happened to this algorithm if I stop after K steps, which to my taste is much more practical. There is always constraints that will tell you to stop, and then the bound is not too bad. The bound was almost always around half, somewhere between half and 75%. Now, what happens if I insist on finishing the art gallery until I'll see the whole polygon? Well, in a sense, then I cannot give any bound, because if I insist on seeing each and every point in the polygon, then there is infinitely many points. So this type of algorithm doesn't work. If you want to see algorithms that do work, check my work from some time ago. I think that we have the best algorithm for the art gallery. Now, but it's not greedy. But since you need, for the following argument, some discrete space, assuming that you just want to see the vertices of the polygon, if you want some discrete, or some set of witness points, but it's a finite number of points that you want to see. And I continue with greedy until I'll see the whole universe. And I want to ask how many steps do I need, comparing to how many steps or how many sets the optimum algorithm that again sees the whole polygon. We change the rules of the games. So far we talked about the dual problem where the budget was limited and I try to maximize the areas that I see. Now I insist on maximum the area and I'm trying to minimize the budget. So it's the dual. Minimize how many sets do I need. Okay, and we had dilemmas that said that it's the L step what greedy get is beforehand M was replaced by opt, which was how much opt can see, but now opt insists on seeing everything. So I replaced opt by M. What is M? That's this M. How many atoms do you have? How many vertices in the polygon? Okay, so I just wrote the same lemma, that in the L step, I see at least what optimum C, which is the whole polygon, times 1 minus 1 over, now I'll use not K, but K opt, because that's the optimum number of sets that I need to see the whole polygon. New term, K opt is how many sets I need to see the whole polygon, how many guards. How many vertices do I need to hit all the edges of my graph? All of it to the power of L. L, how many steps did I have? So we saw this lemma already. Let's just reuse this cycle. How many atoms are still uncovered after L steps? I start with M atoms in the universe. The number of atoms that I covered so far is this number. So the number of atoms that are left are just M minus this number, which is just a very convoluted way to say it's M times 1 minus the 1 over here. It's M times 1 minus K. Okay, it's M times 1 minus M times the whole creature. So it's M times everything here to the power of L. Okay, and I want to ask how large can L be? How many iterations of the greedy do I need to do before I covered everything? So let's assume that I stopped the greedy not when I covered everything, but one step before. So I redefine L as how many steps do I need until I have maybe one element left, maybe more. But in the next iteration, in the L+1, I will see everything in the greedy. Okay, so L is now redefined. L is a maximum number of iterations that greedy will do until it, in the next iteration, it is done. So that's the number of atoms that are left after L step. Now, if L is this largest number, then still I'm leaving at least one element in that is at least m times this number to the L should be larger or equal than 1. There is at least one element that is left in this step. Very cute trick. I'm not counting until it's 0. I'm counting until it's almost 0. So that's the number of steps until I'm almost done. 1 is larger than m times 1 over k. K here I just had enough on this slide. It's k opt. That what the optimum algorithm will give me if I'm trying to be very wise about how I cover, which is what we've seen this trick before, but no brainer here, just rewriting this number. I want to express everything as power of e. But this number 1 minus 1 over k, sorry, 1 minus 1 over k to the L doesn't look like related to E immediately. To make it an E, it should be 1 minus 1 over k to the k. So I'll just write it as 1 minus 1 over k to the power of L over k. Right? Because x, whatever x is, to the power of k, all of it, to the power of L over k, but that's just x to the L. That's the only thing that I did by moving from here to here. And why did I do this exercise? Because I want to relate it to something that depends on E. So this number, 1 over 1 minus k to the k, this is less than 1 over E. Remember, E is what you're getting if you're writing 1 plus 1 over k to the k, then it will go when k goes to infinity. It will go to E. And if I replace the plus by minus, then it will go to 1 over E. And we are almost done. So this is small or equal than 1 over E to the power of L over k. And now it's completely straightforward automatic thinking. So let's take the 1 over E to the L over k to the side of the 1, that is multiplying both sides by E to the L over k. On the left side, I get L over k. K here is, I get back to write it as k opt, because we're already at the end. K is a k opt. How many sets do I need in the optimum? And this number should be smaller or equal than m. Where is this m? That's the m that was left over here. It's very technical, tedious writing, but completely no-brainer. The only part that you needed to think was in the proof of lemma 2, where we said, how much do I gain when I take the next system. Everything from here was straightforward. OK, stepping right here, I still don't know how large can L be. So I take ln log to the base e from this side and log to the base e or from this side. Standard trick, why? Because I don't want the e over here, so I'll take the ln of e to the power, so the power goes before the ln. What do I have on the left side? L divided by k opt. But if one thing was smaller than the other, then ln of this thing was smaller than the ln of this thing. So on the left side, you have L over k opt. On the right side, you have ln of m, and we are done. Because it means that L is smaller or equal than k opt ln m. The number of iterations that the algorithm is doing is at most k opt. Sorry, the number of sets that I will do, the number of sets that the greedy algorithm will produce is smaller or equal than what optimum will give you times ln m. Make sense? And just to remind you that a few weeks ago, a few meetings ago, we saw this example that shows that greedy, instead of finding two sets, it finds log n many sets instead of finding two. That is, that the approximation factor could be as bad as log n. And the other proof just showed you that the approximation factor is never worse than log n or ln n. OK, so let's close this discussion. OK, and moving to something completely different. By the way, we talked about when do I have a problem which is not submodular. Let's think about a case that is not submodular. That is that what was the submodularity over here? What was a definition of the submodularity? And thanks for the correction. It says if you have a small set of elements and you have some other bomb, guard for the art gallery, guard that you'll add, and you're asking how much gain do I get by adding this guard to the small set? That is, what is the total value when x is present minus the total value without x? That will tell me what is the benefit from adding x to a. Here I'll write what is a benefit from adding x to b, and the assumption is that b contains all the elements of a plus a few. Submodularity would say, since you already have a few elements, then adding x it can see less of a new area in the art gallery. My measurement is how much new area x sees, and if I have already a few guards and I add x, or I have a few guards plus another few plus x, x will bring less new area into it. What would be a good example of something that is not submodular would be what happens if every point, for example, in the art gallery, I'll say that it's seen only if two guards see it. Again, I'll call the point guarded only if two guards in different locations see this point. What does it mean? That when I'll take a point by itself, it has no value. It gives me no benefit from having a point by itself. I need to have one point already and then to place the other one. And then suddenly the new points get all its value because it adds a lot of error. Make sense? So it's easy also to check problems that are not submodular at essentially every time that what your previous sets did really change to what you are doing. Your value depends on your predecessors. OK, I'm moving to a different problem from a mounts list as well. very easy case of clustering, still under the big umbrella of approximation. So I want to cluster a set of points, which is, as you know, is NP-hard, like any other interesting problem. And I want to find clusters. And now there is lots and lots of ways to decide about what are the clusters, and a lot of ways to measure quality of clustering. So here my what happened to me? Here my clustering will be as follows. So I'll have three clusters, C1, C2, and C3. And I have a lot of other points. And these are the cluster head, or the centers. Think about the center of the clustering. And how do I assign points to the clusters? If these are the location of the three clusters, I'll just take every point and assign it to the nearest cluster. Think about the clusters, the centers as Starbucks. Here are all the people. Each person will go to the nearest Starbucks. If you know what is Voronoi diagram, then think about the Starbucks, think about the Voronoi diagram. Each person, depending on what is its nearest Starbucks, that's the center that it's going to. OK, now that's not controversial yet. Now I'll tell you how do I measure the quality of my clustering. I can ask for every cluster what is the average distance to the center, or the sum of distances, or the sum of square of distances, but I'm not going to do any of this. I want to say it's not cluster, it's not Starbucks, it's actually fire stations that I'm deciding to build. And I don't expect fire at all the houses. I expect fire at one time in only one of the houses. And what I'll pay would be the distance from the fire station to the house. But which house? The most remote house from the fire station. So that sounds a bit confusing. So what are we doing? For every house, we are assigning this house to one of the fire stations. Which one? The nearest one. What tells me if that's a good location of the fire station or not, given that I can build only three? It will be, I'll measure the distance from the fire station to the most remote point. Out of all the points over here, the distance to the most remote point is 4.47. The distance from C3 to the most remote is 3, and the distance from here to the most remote point is about 3. So that is a bottleneck, and that's what I measure. That's what I'm trying to minimize. In other words, if I'll build a disk of radius 3.69 points at C3, it will contain all the points in this disk, in this region. Disk of radius 365 will contain all the purple points. Disk of larger set, maximum of the 3 of 4.47, contains all the red points. And what determines the cost or the quality is a bottleneck. The bottleneck will be the maximum of these three numbers. Okay. And obviously, as I moved my cluster heads, the most remote points will change, as well as who belongs to each cluster. This point that now belongs to this cluster, because it has such a nice fire station / Starbucks next to it, now we'll decide that C3 becomes closer, and we'll leave C1 to belong to the cluster of C3. So we are minimizing the bottleneck distance. That's a type of That's the type of clustering we are doing. We have a budget of k clusters. Where should we place them so that the distance from every point to the nearest Starbucks will be as small as possible, which as usual is NP-hard. Just to give it a name, that's delta c, the distance for every point pi, the distance from pi to the nearest neighbor of pi, the nearest point, among or to pi. Pi is one of the houses, and c is the list of centers, the list of Starbucks or fire stations. And that's what I'm trying to minimize. And since I cannot do it, I'll do approximation. But the approximation is very simple and very cute. What do? I'll put the first center anywhere you want. I'll put the first center anywhere you want. And I claim that if my budget is an approximation on what am I aiming here, k is given, the budget is given. What I can approximate is what the distance, what the bottleneck distance, what the distance to the nearest one. So before we continue, let's meditate about the case of one center. Here is my set of points. Let's say that they are all in the plane. The assumption here is that it's in some d-dimensional space and some measured distance, no matter what. But let's assume that it's all in the plane. And where should I put the fire station? K equal 1, a single one. Where should it be placed so the distance to the most remote point is as small as possible? The center in what sense? I mean, because center, there are plenty of definition of centers. So the center of? Mass will do if I look at average distance, but it's the most remote point that I care for. Let's do it in 1D first. Here are all my points, all my houses are in 1D. Where will you put the single station to minimize the distance to the maximum, to the furthest away point? Midpoint defined how? Look at the left and the right. Look at the average, just the middle point. Place it right here. And what will be the optimum distance right here? D. That would be the penalty that you'll pay. That would be the most remote point. And the proof is very simple, assuming that I'll put the point right here, not in the middle. Then my distance to this point will be more than d half. The same goes if I put it to the right. So back to this problem, so we can go home. Where should I put it? It's not, there is no, it's trying to catch the outlier. The most remote house is what I cared. If I have a big cluster of houses, but one house far, far away, they are all equally all equally important. There is nothing average in it. And all the distances are all in the plane. Yes? That's good approximation, but no. But it's good approximation.
So take the largest x value and the smallest x value, find the middle, that's your x value, take the largest y value, the smallest y value, take the middle, that's your y value.
I think that you're almost right. You're talking about the smallest square. I will find the smallest disk. Find the smallest disk that contains all the points. It has either 2 points or 3 points on its boundary, but that's the smallest radius disk that contains all the points. And of course, I'll put the fire station right here at the middle. And why this is smallest disk is good? Because it minimizes the distance from the fire station to the most remote point. The bottleneck distance would be as small as possible. All the points are in distance r, and every other location will make it more than r. Now back to the factor 2, so we can really go home. We're already a bit late. I picked an arbitrary point, and I put the fire station right here. What is my bottleneck right now? What is the distance to the most remote point? 2r. 2 is appeared right here because it could be that the most remote point, it is in this case, but in any case, if I took the diameter, definitely I covered everything. They don't have to be diametral pair. Maybe it's a bit less than 2, but 2 is the right percentage. So what the algorithm tells you? It says the first Starbucks, put anywhere you want. Measure the distances to all the points from the first Starbucks. Find the point that is the furthest away from the first Starbucks. Put another Starbucks at the point that is the furthest away. Now check for every point what are their distances to the nearest of the two Starbucks. Pick the one that is the furthest away, that complains the most loudly. Put the next Starbucks right there. And so on and so forth until you are running out of the Starbucks. Always pick the furthest away point. So we'll prove that this is at most factor 2 of the the optimum that I would get with the same number of Starbucks. Okay, that's good. We have Monday, right, and then Wednesday. I'll tell you at the meantime. No, I'm not very good in. We have next week. Wednesday, 2 more meetings, right? So yeah, we'll talk about it. Not much to say about the final, all the same as the midterm. I'll tell you exactly which area it will cover. It will have some decent overlap with the midterm, but it's not disjoint sets, but it will have some overlap, but it's not everything that we cover this year. I'll decide exactly what the point that I thought in the midterms that you can use more practice so that, yeah. Thank you.